Hi, welcome Florian to Prorian and the discussion on AI and regulatory affairs.
Thank you, Jakob, and thank you for having me here. Actually, it's a very interesting subject, and let's see what we can take out from this.
Absolutely. To our viewers, Florian is a regulatory executive with deep expertise across global drug development. He's known for building agile, high-performing teams and integrating regulatory strategy with end-to-end development. With a strong focus on AI and digitalization, he brings a forward-looking approach to accelerating submissions, enabling smarter decisions, and driving regulatory as a core business function. I am particularly very excited to talk to Florian today because after we got connected, conversation showed how much we share in common in the way we like to approach AI, its utilization and deployment in regulatory affairs. And so I have a few questions, and hopefully we can just go through them and hear your thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, thank you indeed. Definitely, I'm not the AI expert. I'm very passionate about introducing AI in pharma regulatory. I can see huge potential for this.
Yes,
And we described at one point is a lot of smoke in the room, you know?
that's right. There is a visible surge in conversations across pharma today, boardrooms, regulatory leadership, even day-to-day operations. But you say there's a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
How much of this momentum would you classify as real progress versus noise?
You know, I've been in regulatory for more than 20 years, and I see waves. The real-world evidence wave, the digital health wave, and now is AI. And every time when it's a wave, is also a lot of smoke.
Hmm.
Literally, because it's the smoke in the room.
That's right.
You cannot see always clearly for what is real and is what is kind of haze
Hmm.
created by vendors, consultants, and honestly, sometimes the leadership team there are very much pressure on they need to show doing AI. Right now is definitely a mix because it's real substance, meaningful substance, but it's also sitting under a small layer of noise, you know.
Hmm.
And I mentioned previously is substance because the consultancy company, they estimate a lot of potential and AI can generate a lot of money and value for pharma industry. And we are already seeing real applications in drug discovery, in new molecules, in signal detection, for example, in document automation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a company like in silico medicine, they are putting AI medicine in clinical trials and they are running already in phase 2 and 3 clinical trials. And they're fantastic. And actually, I think it's the CEO from in silico. He mentioned the AI generated drugs are here, but this is what started 8 years ago. I mean, when you have the boardroom narrative, this is a different story, you know. Executives are announcing AI transformation strategies without, in my opinion, a very clear operating model.
Hmm.
And the regulatory teams are receiving mandates to adopt AI, but without anybody defining what it means, what is the governance behind it. And this is where the smoke becomes dangerous because it creates urgency without a real direction. And this combination actually tends to exactly produce the wrong outcome. On short, to frame it, the technology is real, the readiness is not. And especially in regulatory affairs here, when every decision basically has a patient safety dimension, the gap between the technology reality and the organizational readiness is where the conversation should start, in my opinion.
Yeah. Because I just finished another conversation specifically with reg tools, and the expert said exactly the same thing, that we need two things. We need a roadmap and we need a data governance plan. So I want to bring it back to what you are sharing when it comes to the disconnect that is being caused because of the hype, the urgency, but the lack of clarity. So when we talk about that, one keyword you used is readiness. So in your mind, what would count as readiness? Where do we focus on when we say that we need to get our organization to a state of being ready?
I think here is also the biggest disconnection because the leadership expect AI to be a solution. Yeah.
Yeah.
Regulatory folks that are really hands-on on the submissions understand that AI can be a very powerful enabler. However, this difference creates a lot of confusion because the leadership might come and say why we're not using AI yet to prepare the submission, and the person in the room asks which part exactly?
Yeah.
The strategies, the gap analysis, the CMC, the PSR, the labeling negotiation, because the AI itself is not prepared to do the submission. Can help with some specific defined tasks, definitely. But what is very important is it needs to have someone who have a deep knowledge of the domain, validate it, and stand behind it. And actually, the second big disconnection I see in what I call the advanced search tool perception. Many regulatory professionals, and I say with this respect because it's a natural starting point, see the LLM tools like upgraded Google with better answers. And usually the vendors sometimes even reinforce this because it's the easiest entry point for them. What is missing here is the workflow transformation potential. What can be really deployed and what is a level of, and properly governed, a level of governance. Because AI is not a tool just who can only provide answers faster, whereas properly deployed and with the right governance, actually it might be very, very useful because you can deal with a huge amount of data, cross-reference safety signals, databases that usually human cannot manually triangulate. This is where it might raise a really value proposition.
Yeah.
What is missing right now is education. Because when an organization tries to skip the foundational understanding of what AI can and cannot do in this moment and go straight to deployment, you basically get shadow AI. Let's say people using ChatGPT for their own accounts to draft regulatory documents, no version control, no trial, no validation. You can even have outputs that contain plausible sounding but factually wrong.
Yeah.
Because they can hallucinate. And in a world, actually, a wrong citation is not just an embarrassing error. It can delay approval by months. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And that's really going to be the key, I believe, when it comes to a plan. The question is, okay, where do you want this intervention to begin? Because there are several workflows in regulatory where we can introduce the power of AI, and we need to have the right approach, the right understanding, even literacy and education. I think there are several questions there as to what sort of education needs for what sort of roles, decision makers, leaders, versus those who are operationally going to execute. My question would be, where have we seen good examples of AI capability as a view to positive or beneficial output? I think you mentioned about Reg Intel, PV, CSR. Could you share those examples?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, in this moment, I see three areas that are really working, not theoretically. First, as you mentioned, regulatory intelligence, because this is the most mature and the most under-evaluated. The volume of health authorities' guidances, concept papers, scientific opinions, whatever documents, and it's really impossible for any team, no matter how good they are, to consume and synthesize and to understand everything in real time.
Yeah.
Let's say this part, AI tools specifically designed for regulatory intelligence, and there are some platforms, let's say like Sightline Regulatory, where I recall a good, not so bad actually, from Friar. For sure, there are a lot of other solutions on the market.
Yeah.
But these kind of solutions can surface relevant, flag new guidances that might affect the portfolio and can be linked to the portfolio.
Yes.
And this has immediate measurable impact on the quality of regulatory strategy.
Yes, absolutely.
I think, in my opinion, this is one of the most important. The second one is the pharmacovigilance, signal detection from adverse events databases, literature screening, summarizing for periodic reports. These are high volume and time sensitive tasks that where AI is already reducing dramatically the work of the people, that can reduce workload from 30 to 50% in some documentation implementation. And also has some very interesting developments because recently they starting to use a common platform for detecting all the adverse events, and sometimes it might be with our monthly or quarterly reports and updates of safety to be behind the health authority about our own adverse events, and another one that actually is really interesting, and I saw very interesting numbers as well, are drafting the clinical study reports. When you can draft and automate the documents, the CSR are one of the most intensive documents to be written in drug development, might be 600, 800 pages, for example.
Sure.
And AI can handle a significant portion of the standard text. The methods, population description, the boiler safety doesn't replace the medical writer. And this is very clear to understand. It transfers medical writer from someone who just typed in someone who validates and to see what is there.
Yes.
Differentiates this area from where the AI still struggle. Yeah. In this area, we have a defined scope and very structured data input. And definitely is augmenting a human expert, not replacing the judgment of the human in place. And actually everywhere, and this should be, let's say, the motto of using AI, human in the loop. Basically, this is a basis for anything we are doing. In my opinion, for implementing fast and for having a winning solution, we can start with regulatory intelligence aggregation, PSCR literature screening. These are high return, low risk, and demonstrable with a lot of gain.
Yes. I was trying to map, as I was listening to you, what is the difference in these areas where we have good output and these areas where we see increased risk. So in areas like Reg Intel, in PV, in drafting clinical study reports, we are using the power of AI. But in the layers that require judgment, questioning, looking through ambiguity and bringing clarity, we ensure that human in the loop is present. And these are some areas where we are able to combine them very well.
Absolutely.
Vis-a-vis where, let's say, a specialist is using an LLM to deliver a document of value, we do not exactly know what process it employs.
Indeed. My question is, if you have enough time, you can train and understand the process. But here you need two parts. One, to be the right trainer, to be sure that it's the right process and the framework, and you need time. And this is actually what is lacking right now. And this is why when the leadership is coming to regulatory, or usually it's not even coming to regulatory, they're even going to the IT. I still have a big problem with this. And asking, we need to implement something. We saw a lot of investments of big pharma in trying to secure, for example, processors and for NVIDIA, and making connection and making investments, staying in the board of the AI companies. They are starting to secure in this moment, apart from some domain that can be used. There's still a lot to do in finding the right way to use it in such a regulated environment.
Yes. And while we just said it in passing about the CEO of Novartis joining the board of Anthropic, that is actually signaling how we should exemplify that model. So if the one who knows pharma business is the one guiding technology, similarly, I think the one who understands regulatory should be the co-creator of using technology. So here that brings me to the next question, Florian, is it fair to expect that the initial momentum would be slow, especially for an industry like pharmaceuticals, and especially for a workflow like regulatory, where we need to do a lot of deep thinking and go really granular in our workflows to give the right guidance to how AI should be deployed? And I think that brings us back to the first comment, where do we begin? So maybe could I ask you what sort of a picture emerges in terms of educating decision maker, educating a regulatory specialist, bringing collaboration between technology and regulatory, who has rights, what time this could take to first ideating and putting things in place and then actually getting the delivery out of AI, which would be exponential.
Yeah, indeed. All this should be run in parallel. Yeah. Education, trying to pilot, trying to understand hands-on some systems, because nothing can, in our world, we cannot have sequential steps.
Right.
We need to be highly adaptable and flexible in what we're doing. Also because there are several steps, implementation of any tool, especially software. In our case, it's take a lot of implementation to pilot, to validate, and also to train. And this is why education should stay in multiple levels. First, try to educate C-level and executive. We know that they really lack of time. It's very difficult to find time for them to be educated, but also for them to understand what are the big capabilities of AI and also what are the big limitations there. And not to use AI just because all the others are already implementing, not to use AI to extract for restructuring without understanding what is behind restructuring.
That's right.
And to make AI an excuse for get rid of people at the end without any efficiency. For them, it's extremely important because they drive the timeline sometimes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Second level definitely are people who are working, even they are regulatory, clinical, medical. All of them, they should stay together, of course, together with the IT. And I'm coming back to, definitely in my opinion, this should not start from IT. It should start from the department who have hands-on. Because in my opinion, especially for regulatory affairs, when the IT leads the integration, you all usually can get the wrong outcome. Not because IT team are not competent. They are absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And they are excellent on what they are doing.
Yes.
But the problem is if they evaluating tools only from the technical perspective, like integration with actual systems, cybersecure, posture, data governance, compliance, the total cost of ownership, these are the kind of criteria that are really not very visible.
That's true.
And when they evaluate the NI tool, they don't understand the regulatory context, how they will answer questions, how to interpret the EMA assessment reports correctly, how to define a class 2 or class 3 variations for a EU regulation, for example, or how to handle the nuances in the CTD structure. This is why, from the beginning, in my opinion, regulatory, but also for other departments, clinical operations, for CROs, feasibility, for example, groups in CROs as well, for everything that is coming from safety and pharmacovigilance, they should lead the implementation.
Yes.
And basically, this is, let's say, the $1 billion problem to describe the gap, because right now, as I mentioned, pharma companies are spending enormous sums of AI implementation that are functional but might be operationally useless. Because at the end, you have tools that are underutilized.
Yes.
And this creates a compounding problem.
Yes.
Leadership loses confidence. Budgets are cut off, and you land in 3 years behind where you intended to be. Again, the regulatory team should be at the table at the point of the requirements definition. This is very important in my opinion.
Yes.
And even implementing other digital systems, I always insisted in my past that our regulatory teams pilot the tools ourselves in realistic conditions with real regulatory scenarios. And this is the way also the implementation of ADMS and RIMS stay with my last experience. Not vendor demos are fantastic, but the regulatory professionals are expert in seeing through the vendor demos, And basically we know very well when an AI tool gives us the wrong answer, But it is important to identify from the beginning what a GXP inspection can raise, because AI doesn't feel the context. And without a governance framework, basically you don't have the foundation to implement anything. And I will again, and maybe we'll discuss a bit later, the first FDA letter about AI.
Yes.
That was not really about AI in that case, but anyway, it's the first where it's clearly mentioned AI in the context of an inspection that an inappropriate use of AI.
Yes. Thanks. Yes, we can touch upon that. That's some news. You made several important points, and one of them which deserves being repeated is the imperative of approaching the adoption of AI should be a granular breakdown of RA judgment that takes place in every workflow in order to guide building a tool for that workflow. And another important point that you made is RA specialists are the ones who would be able to look through the demo of any tool that is being developed. Even senior leaders in RA could be distanced from the day-to-day challenges. So important to get from the grassroots specialists to be able to take a look at the tools that are being built in order for it not to go off in a direction. So thank you for that. Florian, you also did allude to the pilots, regulatory organizations, and pilots are not easy because it's like changing the engines of a plane when they are flying. So could you share a little bit about what you mentioned earlier in our conversation about pilots? What do we need to take care when we run pilots?
I think the most important part is to go with clear targets and criteria, go no go before you start. Because I see pilot fatigue. I see it everywhere. Even in experienced person in the past. You go with a pilot in some functional regulatory, for example, literature for pharmacovigilance. It runs for 6 months. The results looks good internally, and nothing happened. Nothing scaled.
Yeah.
Something is because of data architecture, maybe not ready for enterprise development because it's not defined the governance upfront, or again, there are not defined decision points into the pilot design. Nobody says very clear, if we reach this point, we deploy it. And I think these are, let's say, two non-negotiable parts of a pilot. First, to define a go, no-go criteria before you start. Not 6 months after you became attached to the project.
Yeah.
To define what does success like specifically. A reduction in average timeline, reduction in error rate, or anything that are very clear thresholds. If you cannot define them, you are not ready for a pilot. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Second, involve the right people. And this is absolutely essential. People that are hands-on in the processes, not really just knowing something about technology. Because it's important to understand from the beginning if the format doesn't match how the dossier systems works right now. Yeah. And if you discover this 3 months later, you already missed 3 months. Yeah. Another discussion you mentioned, if there are necessary one or multiple pilots. In my opinion, of course, doesn't make any sense to dissipate in a lot of small pilots, but you can run 2, 3 in parallel pilots, each of them to have their own targets, their own team. And for example, you can run regulatory intelligence, document drafting support, submission tracking, for example. Yeah. But to create learnings for each of them, and each of them should be with a separate team, separate owner, separate budget, and separate success metric. Doesn't mean that all of 2 or 3 or whatever should be implemented, the one who reaches the target. And I think this is, in my opinion, the right way to run. And the companies that are scaling AI in regulatory through pilots, they design the pilot with a final architecture in mind. And they involve everybody, legal, quality, IT as well from the beginning, but in a process that is owned and driven by regulatory.
Yes. You also mentioned about how you envision a future where the regulatory specialist and the machine is sort of a cyborg conducting their regulatory work. Would you like to speak a little bit about? I'd like to hear that in your own words. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I even captured the cyborg word from somewhere. I love the word because actually it captures something important. is not human versus AI.
Yes.
It's human plus AI enhancing. The value comes from integration, but you cannot integrate something you don't understand and or you cannot trust. Yeah. Let's say the cyborg professional regulatory is somebody who developed a calibrated relationship with an AI tool. Yeah.
Yes.
For example, in 2 years from now, I see an experienced regulatory strategist preparing a type 2 documentation. She or he uses regulatory intelligence to frame exactly the variation, to understand the precedents on similar variations, to use the AI drafting assistant to generate the first version of the clinical overview. And this is something that led time to the strategists to look for strategy and to check and to see what can be implemented. Which part can be fully transformed? Everything that is high volume, structure, and rule based, query management, literature surveillance, variation tracking. Yeah, this kind of they will be substantially driven forward by AI in the next 5 years. What definitely will remain human: regulatory strategy, health authority management, crisis navigation, what else? And of course, any ethical judgment. In my opinion, in the next 3 to 5 years, the differentiator between the organizations that are getting this right and those that are fall behind it will not be the technology. It will be the talent architecture, how they build up, how they are investing in building regulatory professionals that are technologically fluent, strategically sharp, and AI literate. Yes. And this is, in my opinion, the winning formula.
It's fantastic to hear it in your words, Florian. In fact, I think this is the right moment to share something that I came across recently. And it's very important for us to also keep our eyes open to the challenges, to mitigation, solutions, and best practices happening in other industries. So scale is one augmentation, but that actually gives us enough headroom for thinking and for higher complexity. Second is to see what are the boundaries that we will push to solve problems that we don't even see today. Today, we are solving problems based on what we know to be problems. The boundaries that our mind has gotten used to seeing through decades of working in this field. There is space outside of those boundaries which we have not even probably understood, which we will probably start to see once we deliver at scale and at a particular complexity.
Absolutely.
So
Exactly.
Thanks for sharing about the cyborg approach, because to me, that's a very powerful foundation for thinking about the new frontiers that we can reach.
And actually, I think it's coming from King. 3 weeks ago, and it was a promo with a kind of new device, a kind of cyborg. It was an articulated mechanical one to support you skiing if you have problems with your knees, and it was absolutely fantastic because it was nobody else skiing. I was skiing
alone.
And at the end, actually, I feel better. My knees didn't hurt. And I made the connection with the cyborg in haste. But
okay. Yes. Yeah.
I expect the next upgrade, let's say.
Of course, if we have to extrapolate that fantastic example you shared, is not only is it saving your energy for a better and a longer skiing experience, but you would have probably even explored a different slope, which you would not have explored if you did not test this out. So I just try and replicate it to the thinking capability, to the interpreting capability at scale, and what are the new slopes that we would probably go to as a regulatory specialist. It's just so exciting to wait and look for that. But the important point is we have a lot of work to do right now.
Absolutely. And this is where C-level executives and regulatory leaders should start today. Yeah.
Yes.
And invest in AI literacy for the entire regulatory team, not a one-day workshop, a structured and ongoing program.
That's true.
This doesn't mean definitely that people need to know to code. They need to understand. And what else I had in my mind, sorry, to design for scale from day one. Yeah.
For scale.
Even if pilot, design the pilot for the intention to deploy.
Yes.
Define the governance model, define the accountability chain, already the SOP integration. Um, in my opinion, definitely AI can have also the potential to change the frame of the workflows. But
Yes.
in the same time, in any new software tools, is good to stop and to think about your workflows and processes,
Hmm.
but I would not go to a major change because at the time will not be only the technology that stop the integration, but also the people. You need to
Yes.
balance this and to the people to understand that AI is helping them and not changing and make their life even harder.
Yes.
Actually, you mentioned education.
Yeah.
We definitely where we should start. First, start to read the guidances.
Mhm.
Define the FDA and EMA that are publicly available and they're not difficult to integrate. Definitely engage in all the professional network, RAPS, FDA, all of them, they are producing already high quality A content, inclusive trainings,
Hmm.
inclusive papers. And even at a personal level, use AI tool in low risk context in your personal, build your own intuition, understand how it works, understand the limits, and always challenge the answers. In my opinion, and this is what I'm doing on daily basis. I'm using 4 or 5 different AI tools,
Hmm.
different for
That's
every
amazing.
part because each of them they are better in
Yeah.
different
They have unique
words
capabilities. Yeah.
capabilities. For example, I use Perplexity as a e-haze Google are fantastic on this.
Mm.
I use Gemini for a lot of integration or integrating with Gmail, with my personal laptop and so on. I use Claude, for example, for more complex situation. Claude is not very well connected with the internet. That means I use the data from Gemini to fit Claude. And all of them, they're fantastic tools, help make your life easier every single day. I
Yeah.
even started to use recently voice detection tool. I love the voice detection tools, the best one. Right now, an AI, absolutely fantastic. There are
Yes.
a lot of others.
So, Florian, we did have this interesting incident that happened with the FDA warning letter that revealed to us the type of response to a query which shows a not even an over dependence, a wrong dependence on AI or an AI agent that led to this warning. And I know LinkedIn is full of comments on that, and I sometimes feel bad for the organization as well. But I think the more important part is what do we learn from this? So can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I was surprised by the interest on this. I think meantime everybody knows about this famous letter. I think will remain as a major milestones in the first time when literally it was AI explicitly mentioned in a FDA letter. It was to a small cosmetical pharmaceutical. It was about the Annex 11 interpretation because basically they failed to check the legislation. In other words, if I recall correctly, they mentioned in the letter, if they mentioned you are not aware of the legal requirements because the AI agent, never told you that is required.
Hmm.
And I'm always thinking if the FDA inspector managed to keep his face
It's true.
hearing this kind of stuff. Basically,
Yeah.
it's like somebody is saying you, I don't know this legislation exists in a way. But to consider the AI agent as Moise coming with the 10 laws from the mountain Sinai and mention these are the laws and you should believe without any check
Yes.
is definitely not really an appropriate use in pharmaceutical manufacturing because they also had some inappropriate use in pharmaceutical manufacturing, not only
Hmm.
in a GXP environment, is simply lack of governance. You are the ultimate responsible when you sign a document.
Yeah.
But this definitely trigger a very interesting point that will be a milestone in education. Raised so much noise around, and this is good because right now everybody is aware. Okay, I need to be more aware how we use agent AI
Yes.
even for asking if and challenge. everything.
Yes.
If you don't have the expertise, you cannot delegate this expertise to an AI tool.
Yes.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Employ somebody who
Exactly.
understand what the AI tool is coming back if you don't have the expertise.
Yeah.
Of course, right now doesn't mean that any reason to avoid AI.
Yes.
Is a reason to govern AI properly. That we needed to guide it right.
Yeah. I reiterate what you said is don't substitute expertise.
Absolutely.
And that also doesn't mean we should avoid. We should know how to use it within the bounds of governance. And actually, might make sense for me to read out the parts of the letter just to keep this in context. FDA said if you use AI as an aid in document creation, you must review the generated documents to ensure they were accurate and actually compliant with CGMP. Your failure to do so is in violation, etc., etc. Second, over-reliance on artificial intelligence for your drug manufacturing operations was also documented during the inspection. For example, the FDA investigator found that you had not conducted process validation prior to distribution of your drug as required under 21 CFR 211.100 and informed you as such. You replied that you were not aware of the legal requirement as the agent you use never told you it was required. So I think it goes on to mention very clearly that if you don't have the expertise in a particular area, don't try and bridge that expertise with an AI agent. Because right now, there is no way of validating what the AI agent is looking at to deliver you that information. And
Absolutely.
if we are able to prove to the FDA that these are the sources that my agent is looking at, this is the process that the agent follows to deliver me this information. And if that process and those sources are okayed by the governance model, then the chances of it failing will be minimal or nil. In fact, it brings us back to what you mentioned earlier about using LLM and ChatGPT in uncontrolled environments, which a regulatory specialist could do to bridge that expertise. And that's a dangerous thing. And right now, while we have a lot of learning to do, one specific don't for a regulatory specialist and a professional is not to try and bridge your expertise by substituting an LLM to deliver that information and then depend on it for your work, because that could lead to contradictions, that could lead to huge failures for the organization.
And again, I cannot stress this enough. This needs education. And in my opinion, good AI literacy in regulatory looks like this. A regulatory professional who can identify, let's say, appropriate use for the AI in their work, evaluate the tools outputs critically, understand the validation and the documentation requirements under the regulation, and know when to escalate any concerns that are. They need to understand what are the extremely high benefits for the AI, but also to know the limits. They need to be intelligent users of intelligent governance of the AI and to bring their NI to the AI.
Oh, that's
natural intelligence to artificial intelligence.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that, Florian. I think we covered some excellent points here, and I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and also the manner in which you approach the subject, the openness and the authenticity. So thank you very much for spending time with me today on Prorian to guide.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jacob. It was a very nice and interesting discussion. Again, I'm very passionate of this. I cannot say I'm the expert, but with common good sense and knowledge, I think we need this kind of discussions in order to move forward in general our domain.
All right. On that note, I'd like to thank you and say goodbye for now, but continue the conversation with yourself between us and several other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.